What is going on, everyone? This is the Fourth and Fantasy Podcast. My name is Meek. I'm here with my co-host Woo. And Woo, we're starting something exciting, man. This is going to be a right now weekly fantasy podcast. We're going to give you everything dynasty related. We're going to talk about projections. We're going to talk about startups. We're going to talk about whatever the people want. We're going to bring it to you. Woo, I'm excited. How about you?
Yeah, man, this is a great day. We've talked about this before, working together, and we got some boring shifts, and, not much is going on. We pretty much just talk about football all day as it was. So it's pretty much a podcast without the microphone and the camera.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited to have, this setup going on and, actually get it out to the people.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Woo and I, we worked in the summertime together. Like Woo said, we were security guards at a beach club. So there were a lot of hot days out on the deck talking about fantasy football, and look at us, we turned it into a podcast. So a little background, I've done fantasy football for a little over a decade now. I've been doing different redraft leagues, started a dynasty league that Woo and I are a part of. Humble brag, champ in year 2, so and also redraft league. You can see it here on the wall, ladies and gentlemen. The champ is here. So it's exciting. We love fantasy football, and it's a great time, Will, right?
Oh, 100%. You're pretty much looking at the Patriots dynasty right here. This guy just prints championships. It's so frustrating. I've lost to him and his dad in back-to-back years. I'm trending towards Jim Kelly status, and I'm sick of it.
Yep. No, and just as much as it's important for you guys to get some information from us, it's important for us to get multiple takes. You know what I mean? So it helps us just as much as it helps you. So for today, we're gonna get our podcast started. We're gonna go through a quick series of fantasy finishes. Today is gonna be episode 1. We're gonna go over fantasy finishes for quarterbacks. We're gonna give you from 12 to 1 fantasy finishes. We're gonna give you some stats. We're gonna give you some of our takes, and we might even give you some of our dynasty outlooks, whether that's someone to buy or maybe even sell and get out while you can. But before we get into that, we're going to start with our quick question of the day. Quick question of the day for you is Super Bowl matchup and winner. Who do you got? Who are you liking?
Yeah, so we're recording this right before the AFC and NFC championship game, so we've yet to see who gets there. Right off the bat, I have an Eagles future. Yep. So that's definitely
love the futures.
Yep, something I'm keeping in mind. So I do want Philly. I'm going to take Philly over Washington today, even though Washington's very scary. And Hurts being injured, that just makes me really nervous.
Yep.
And then on the other side, I refuse to bet against Patrick Mahomes until I see him lose. Like it's the Brady thing all over again. So I'm taking Kansas City. Rematch of the Super Bowl a couple years ago, and I got to take Philly. But God, like I just said, it's tough to bet against Mahomes. So I'm gonna be nervous for the next couple weeks. But yeah, I got Philly.
Absolutely, so tough. I'm gonna go a little bit spicy. I think I'm taking the Commanders today. Jayden Daniels is giving you, ladies and gentlemen, the greatest rookie QB performance that we've ever seen. The man is lights out, and I think he just rides that into the Super Bowl. Just like Wu said, you have Hurts who's banged up. So is he 100%? I know he's off the injury report, but who knows what you get out of him. You got a frustrated AJ Brown, and it's like you're gonna hang your hat on Saquon Barkley, and I don't know, is that enough against this Commanders team that is just so dynamic on offense with Jayden Daniels running the football and also throwing the ball to Terry McLaurin, which I also want to say Terry McLaurin having a stellar fantasy season. He is probably the DJ Moore of last year, where we talked about all this potential of Terry McLaurin, and he just needs the quarterback. And lo and behold, Jayden Daniels arrives, and so is Terry McLaurin. So give me the Commanders. And then on the AFC side, listen, I have been a lifelong Chargers fan. I despise the Chiefs, but Patrick Mahomes he's just that guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can say the refs, you can make all these excuses, but at the end of the day, the man wins. And until someone can stop them, hopefully it's Josh Allen, but give me the Chiefs. And so Commanders, Chiefs, I think it's going to be the Chiefs. I think historic rookie season aside, I think, Cinderella clock strikes 12, Patrick Mahomes, repeats. And, we're talking about this Chiefs dynasty, which I hate, but,
Yep.
It is what it is.
And real quick, I think Mahomes and Daniels have that like similar attribute where if you're down one score at the end of the game and you have the ball, like they're gonna go win that game. That's just what Daniels been doing all year. So that would be a cool Super Bowl to watch. Who gets that ball last. But we'll see what happens today.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. So that is our quick question of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Now we're gonna get into the meat and potatoes of this, right? So we're talking fantasy finishes. Today we're gonna go through quarterbacks 12 through 1, starting with 12. And like I said, listen, I'm a Chargers fan, and number 12, there's my guy, Justin Herbert, finishing as the QB 12. His ADP was QB 16, had 282.4 fantasy points, and finished the year with 3,870 yards passing, 23 touchdowns, a league low 3 interceptions to go along with a 65.8% completion percentage. Listen, the man ran the ball. He 306 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Threw the ball more this year than he did last year.
I found that really interesting.
I know he was hurt last year, but still he had more pass attempts. Some highlight performances we had for Justin Herbert was week 16 he was the QB3, along with week 10 and 11 as the QB8. You cut down into his road home and road splits. You see he was better on the road than he was at home. 2,110 yards passing, 12 touchdowns, and 1 pick away. And then this is a big stat I love to talk about, right? First half versus second half of the season. First half of the year, you see that Justin was the QB 23, so that's weeks 1 through 8, and then in the second half of the year, that was he was a QB 9, right? So that's 9 through 17. Yeah. When you look at this Chargers team, you see that Jim Harbaugh wanted to play Jim Harbaugh football, right? Oh, yeah. And it's sit back, hand the ball off, and it worked for the first couple of weeks, and then you see Dobbins kind of fizzled out, and they looked around at what was left, and you have your superstar quarterback who can chuck a ball a mile down the field.
He throws such a nice ball,
right?
Oh my God!
So they take it into the bye, and Greg Roman, love or hate him, he looked at his offense and said, "Listen, we need to change this around." And then you started to see Herbert throw the ball more, right? He got more involved passing. You saw Ladd McConkey get really involved in the offense, and you saw in the second half of the year. He was throwing the ball 349 yards against Arizona, 297 yards against Cincinnati, whereas like in the first couple of weeks, 130 yards passing versus Carolina, 125 versus Pittsburgh, right? So they really leaned on their superstar quarterback. So what do you got to say about my man Justin Herbert?
I mean, the guy's a dog. Even playing through injury, he's always got those lower body injuries. I feel like that always creep up on him, and he stays in those games and he puts everything he's got out there. He really has the ability to elevate, his lack of weapons. I would say. I mean, Ladd McConkey, great receiver. Obviously, we've seen all year, but coming into the draft, you got your Malik Neighbors, your Marvin Harrison Jr.'s, and Brian Thomas. He wasn't really in that conversation. So the fact that he was able to put on the performance that he did. It just goes to show that Herbert can really do it all with anybody he's got out there. I mean, besides him, he's got Josh Palmer.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you really going to do with that?
The ghost of Quentin Johnson.
Yeah, QJ. Oh God, yeah.
One of the other big things that is huge that fantasy managers of Justin Herbert have wanted. I know I have him in a dynasty league. Is like, listen, we want to see him run the football. You know what I mean? Like he's 6'6". He's built like Josh Allen, but you never see him run the ball. And you got a little taste of it, this year where he had a career high in rushing yards, 306 yards. And he coupled that with 2 touchdowns, but it was just the start, and it's almost like it's promising to see in that Greg Roman offense that listen, Justin Herbert might be able to run the ball, as we talk about the future outlook for him, obviously I think he needs another pass catching weapon, whether 100%. It's a wide receiver or a tight end. As we go along in this series, we're going to talk about other option or rookies coming in, I think a great option with him. Could you imagine Justin Herbert with a Tyler Warren or a Colston Loveland, not, you know what I mean? Not even talking about like the Emeka Ibukas of the world and stuff like that. Like you give him another pass catching and maybe even a running back in the later rounds. It doesn't have to be, you know, like the Ashton Genties of the world. It could be Quinshon Junkins. It could be Travion Henderson. It could be Ollie Gordon. Just a competent wide running back that you can hand the ball off to, and you know he can do some scary stuff.
Yeah, and Herbert has the ability. You know, he's sitting in that pocket. He's got really good presence. So he can create time for himself. It's not like an Aaron Rodgers where he's got to get the ball out quick. He can give his receivers time to get open, and like you said, if he gets another rookie weapon that like a tight end that can sit just 6 yards in front and just find those open spots, he's going to hit him. And talking about Herbert this year, I mean, 3 interceptions, being able to control the ball like that and time of possession, that's huge, especially when you're in an offense like we mentioned with Harbaugh. They want to just run the ball. And be physical on the defensive end. So that's huge for them. Unfortunately, that playoff game had more interceptions in that game than it did all year, which makes no sense. But listen,
like when we get into like dynasty outlook of Justin Herbert, I think that is a saving grace because I think he's a major buy. Granted, take what I say with a grain of salt because I am a Chargers fan, but I think what the pieces that are around him, he actually has good coaching for the first time in his career. You think back like rookie year, Anthony Lynn, and then, through his other years, Brandon Staley and all of the collapses that, the Chargers had. They have a competent coach. They have a general managing staff that are actually making great moves, both offensively and defensively. So I would say he's a huge buy and you might be able to buy low right now for him.
Yeah, his price definitely isn't going to be as high. When we did our startup 2-3 years ago, he went, 5th overall in that dynasty startup. So his price definitely isn't going to be anywhere near that. It also depends on if it's a Superflex league or not, or if it's one quarterback. But he's definitely someone that I would be looking at. If there's a manager who has him, they're frustrated with what he's got. I would definitely test the waters on that.
100%. All right. Anything else for Justin Herbert, or are we good?
I mean, I don't think so. I will say in our redraft league, I did trade for him before the deadline. I had Joe Burrow, which, I called my shot on that. I got to pat myself on the back. But my team was just an absolute dumpster fire, just injury after injury. So, I needed some kind of change. I don't remember what other pieces were in there, but this was, when he started to turn that corner in the second half of the year, and it was definitely he was definitely a good trade for.
Nice. All right, ladies and gentlemen, coming in at QB 11, we have Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes was ADP at the QB 2, so it was not what you thought you got with Patrick Mahomes. 292 fantasy points, 3,928 yards passing, 26 touchdowns, 11 interceptions with a 67% completion percentage. Ran on the ground 307 yards, 2 touchdowns. And some highlight performances. He was the QB2 in week 12, was QB4 in week 9 and 16. Home and road splits are, about the same. But, when you look at Patrick Mahomes' first half versus second half he was the QB 21, and I'm sure fantasy managers who had Patrick Mahomes really felt that, right?
Oh yeah,
felt that like he was the QB 21. You're spinning the tires, you don't know what to do with him. But then in the second half of the year, he's a QB 7. But probably by that time it was too late. People either cut bait on him, got out of there, or moved on to other options, whether it was like a Bo Nix or anything like that. So what do you got for my man Patrick Mahomes?
I mean, the dude's a winner. He could care less about our fantasy team. So, he doesn't care. He just wants to find a way to win. And, that's what he did, even with all these finishes outside the top 12 in these first 8 weeks. It's all W's, next to the box score. So that's really all he cares about. The dude's a phenomenal talent. He's not a fantasy quarterback, at least not what he was when you have Tyreek Hill and a younger Travis Kelce. It would have been nice to see what a full season of Rashee Rice is, because he really made huge steps within those first 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah. The other thing you got to think about too with Patrick Mahomes is like he had so many prolific years. Defenses had to essentially reinvent how they play defense because of him. That's where you got the popular 2 high safety shell come in, and like you're not going to get beat over the top, and that's due to Patrick Mahomes. So obviously Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes are an elite combo, and they just find ways to win. Like you're not. I guess my question to you, Woo, is do we ever see Patrick Mahomes in that 5,000 yard passing, 40 touchdowns again, or is this the best that we're going to get?
Yeah, I mean, like I just mentioned, you want to see what a full season of Rashee Rice looks like. And to be honest, we might not even see that next year, depending
Right.
on his legal issues. So that's something to consider. But again, like, he's got 2 number 1 overall fantasy quarterback finishes. But the writing was kind of on the wall last year when without Tyreek Hill. He still finished as the quarterback 8, but it just wasn't that upper echelon of quarterback when you're drafting him in the second or third round. So you can really feel when it doesn't pay off. He's so talented that next year we could say all this and he rips off 5,000 passing yards and 45 touchdowns. But I always struggle with taking quarterbacks early as it is, even with like a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson. So spending that high price, you really got to make sure that this guy is going to finish in that top 3. So definitely going into as the years go on, I want to see what next year looks like. But I would be very hesitant to take him at his ADP, and I would expect it to drop a little bit, but just based off the name, it's going to be up there.
I think the interesting thing you're going to see in drafts next year is where does Patrick Mahomes go? So we said this past year he was the QB2, so that's what, a second, third round pick. I think with Travis Kelce as a year older, you don't know what you get out of Rashee Rice. Like, you might see Patrick Mahomes drop to the 7th or 8th round. You know what I mean? Which is like insane to even think about Patrick Mahomes being that low,
right.
Ever. And who knows? Maybe that's something that's an interesting take. But we obviously have to see. There's so many other factors that the draft and free agency and things like that. Like obviously we talk about Rashee Rice. Probably missing out part of next season. It's like, who does he go to? You know what I mean? I'm not entirely sure about DeAndre Hopkins' contract and Hollywood Brown
also getting another year older,
Hopkins. Right? And also those getting another year older. Like, I don't know, he doesn't have those elite weapons around him to prop him up as the QB3 or even the QB8 when he was the year without Tyreek Hill.
And what we've seen from this offense, they don't mind running the ball. Like, even before Pacheco got hurt, that guy can run through anybody. And then all of a sudden
they brought in the ghost of Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, I was just gonna say they revived Kareem Hunt, and even now with Pacheco back, Kareem Hunt still gets those goal line touches and even majority of the work. So at the end of the day, Mahomes and Andy Reid, they want the W. That's all that matters.
Yep.
However that comes. So we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah. All right, we're going to roll into our QB10. QB10's Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray ADP was the QB9. So you got kind of the same return on what you bought in, a little bit less. 300.2 fantasy points. Finished the year with 3,851 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, 11 interceptions to go along with a 69% completion percentage. This part of Kyler Murray's game, I was a little disappointed. I will say I did take Kyler Murray in our redraft league, hoping to get some elite levels with it. Tease a little bit later, I had someone higher up on the ranks that, came through for me. But 572 rushing yards to go along with 5 touchdowns, you were disappointed with that.
100%.
You were definitely disappointed, and some top performances. He was the QB1 in week 2, and then just kind of from there went downhill, right? It was a QB4 in week 10, QB5 in week 7. Home and road splits are essentially identical. And then, first half of the year, he's a QB7. And in the second half of the year, he was QB16. And that second half of the year was really brutal for Kyler Murray because, you were hoping that the connection with Marvin Harrison Jr. would grow. There were a lot of times where, you really wanted to see Kyler run the football and he didn't run it as much as you wanted.
Yeah.
So definitely disappointing from what you were expecting from Kyler Murray.
Yeah, even though we mentioned he finished around his ADP, when going into those drafts, you wanted him at that value because you expected him to finish higher than that, especially coming off an injury. We were expecting a big year pairing him with Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously, Trey McBride, he played with a little bit last year. So, he did finish around his ADP, but you were expecting more. So that's where the real disappointment comes from. And like you had said, for a guy who can outrun pretty much anybody on defense, there were some games where, maybe in the first half he was getting out of the pocket and running a little bit. And then second half, it was almost like, the guy's never run in his life. No. I don't know if that was on coaching, if that was on his decision-making, personally, but you got to see him. He's got to run the ball more.
Yeah,
he's got to be in that, 600 to 700 rushing yards. He can even do more than that.
Right. And I was going to say, I know Arizona fans were definitely frustrated with the play calling. Obviously with Marvin Harrison Jr. along with Kyler Murray. You didn't see him run as much. You didn't see that rapport between Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler even develop during the season. So obviously when we talk about the future of Kyler Murray, it's like, is he that guy? Is he the quarterback of the Arizona Falcons? I mean, Arizona Falcons, Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah.
That is going to propel them into playoffs and deep playoff runs.
Yeah, I mean, what's scary for me is it's the lowest fantasy points per game of his career, and that's not something you want to see go down as your career goes on. You don't want to start hot and then have that come down. You want to keep gradually rising. So that's concerning for me. He hasn't been in a position where he's playing games that really matter, which is unfortunate. But I would like to see him, be competing late in the season and
right.
being in the Hunt graphic. I struggle to sit here and say that he can, take you on a deep playoff run because we just haven't seen it, and we haven't seen him, really playing games that really matter.
No, absolutely. Coming in, we're going to move on to QB9. Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is our QB9 of the year. ADP, he was a QB4, so you lost your value on that one. 311 fantasy points, 2,903 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions to go along with a 69% completion percentage. 630 yards on the ground and 14 touchdowns. That's insane, right?
Nuts. Especially when you got Saquon on your team.
Yes, especially with Saquon too. And when we get into the running back episode, Saquon was equally as insane. Highlight performances, right, from Jalen Hurts. We have week 8, he was a QB1. Week 9, he was a QB2. And week 10, he was the QB3. Home and road splits, kind of the same, a little better on home than he was away.
Mm-hmm.
And then, he was pretty much consistent throughout the year, not where you wanted him, right? First half of the year, he was a QB6, second half of the year, QB8, right? So listen, Jalen Hurts, we'll see what happens. You know what I mean? He's got a playoff game later on today.
Need him bad.
What'd you say?
Need him bad.
Need him bad, right? But I think a lot of it was, you saw the Eagles' offense they were leading a lot of games, and they just relied on Saquon, and you didn't need a lot from Jalen Hurts' arm, right?
Yeah.
As someone who I had Devontae Smith in a redraft league, and not gonna lie, I was pretty disappointed, right? Because they bring in Kellen Moore, you think like, oh, this is going to be a dynamic offense, and you're going to see a little bit more out of the passing game in the arm of Jalen Hurts,
especially with those guys
right?
On the outside.
And think about what the talk was before Saquon came into Philly. Guys always hurt, can never keep it together, and so all signs were pointing to like, we're going to see something from Jalen Hurts. I don't know. How about you? How did you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any ownership of Hurts in any leagues, but if this past year when we're drafting, I definitely wasn't taking into account when I'm looking at Jalen Hurts how much Saquon could affect his production. That's not something I like. If you were considering drafting him, like, I definitely did not think about that enough. Yeah. The fact that he still had 14 rushing touchdowns is ridiculous. But that O-line is just insane, and when you have a guy like Saquon back there, you got to give him the ball.
Absolutely.
And he made it very obvious why.
Yeah.
But looking at these first few weeks, some of his his better performances where he was the QB1 against a really bad Cincinnati defense, QB2 against a really bad Jacksonville defense, QB2 against a really bad Atlanta defense, QB3 against a really bad Dallas defense. So, he had these top performances, and I guess, devil's advocate, you want to take advantage of those bad defenses. But when it came to bigger games, like against Washington, he's a QB16. Against the Rams, QB15. Baltimore, QB17. So, again, Saquon, takes away from a lot of his production, but they got studs at receiver. And you would just, like you had mentioned with Kellen Moore, when he's in Dallas, CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott, were the next coming of Jesus Christ. So, I mean, you would have expected more out of that. But yeah, even though Philly got off to a slow start, they started rattling off all these W's. You wanted to see more from Hurts, and you didn't get it.
Yeah, I guess the question I have for you, Wu, is does Saquon affect the production of Hurts going forward in years to come?
Yeah, you would think. Like I had mentioned, like that the offensive line is insane, and when you have a guy like Saquon, you got to give him the ball. He almost broke the record. I still kind of wish they put him out there for that last week to break it, but I get why they didn't. But yeah, he will affect production, especially in the red zone. They're going to give him the ball more. What's nice is that they still have no problem running that brotherly shove.
Mm-hmm.
So he will get some rushing touchdowns. But yeah, I think Saquon will. You got to see more from the passing game. We might see his rushing come down. Which is all right, not ideal, but yeah, you got to see more from the passing game.
Right. And Saquon's 27 years old. You see that it might be a couple of years. Running backs really start to drop off at age 30. So like this could be something that is concerning, right? Well, what if I told you, right, Saquon Barkley had only 278 receiving yards, right? And you would think like, okay, Jalen Hurts probably had himself a lot of touchdowns, and nope, Saquon Barkley goes on and adds, how many did he have? 13 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Like it's insane. So definitely something to consider going forward in years to come with redraft price of Jalen Hurts.
One thing I will say about Hurts, aside from the fantasy aspect, he's becoming he's always had success since he was in Philly, but he's becoming a better game manager. He took down his interception from 15 to 5, from this past season, so that's huge. He had his career best TD percentage, and also quarterback rating. So it wasn't that the passing game was bad. It wasn't at the volume that you were expecting or hoping for. But yeah, he overall, he's a great quarterback. It's just the fantasy aspect that is a little concerning.
Yeah. All right, moving into our QB8. You never would have guessed that this man would be here at QB8, but Sam Darnold is your QB8. ADP as the QB30. That's nuts. QB30.
The man wasn't even supposed to start.
No, was not supposed to start. We were all expecting J.J. McCarthy to come in, and lo and behold, it's we give the keys to the city to Sam Darnold, and he turns it into a QB8. 312 fantasy points, 4,319 passing yards, 35 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 66% completion percentage, right? And then I'm just going to add on 212 yards and a touchdown, right? Highlight performances, week 14, he was a QB2. Week 2, he was a QB4. Week 12, he was a QB6. My man Sam Darnold loved himself some home cooking because at home he had 2,367 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, and 7 picks. First half of the season, he was QB14. Second half of the season, on fire, QB6. Just wow, Sam Darnold.
Yeah, that was the first thing I wrote in our notes was wow. Like, you see the hat. If you told me 3 years ago that Sam Darnold would be throwing for 4,300 yards and near 40 touchdowns, I would have laughed in your face. So this just goes to show that coaching really matters, and Kevin O'Connell he's up there. He should be in the Coach of the Year conversation. I think he should win. But yeah, Darnold, man, the Duke can throw the ball.
Yeah.
Like even in college, like that was what got him drafted was his arm. And unfortunately, it never worked out with the Jets. I don't think anybody could be a good quarterback under Adam Gase. So I can't really put that on him. Not great with his legs, but he can really stand in the pocket. And when he got Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison,
yes,
for that matter, like it can definitely make his job easier. One thing that we definitely saw, at least I saw towards the end of the season, you notice that he's holding on to the ball a little bit too long, and he was taking a bunch of sacks. Yeah. So that's not great. But towards the end, he kind of fell off, and you wonder if that affects how his free agency is going to go.
Oh, definitely. I think you saw in the last couple of games of the year, especially that playoff game, I think the pressure of doing well and succeeding really kind of, took control of him. You saw him hold the ball more often, like you said. Took some really bad sacks.
Yeah.
But all in all in the season, listen, career high passing yards, touchdowns. And
pretty much across the board.
Pretty much across the board, right?
And he had 2 games over 80%. Like, that's just insane.
It's insane. So I guess my question to you is, do you see Sam Darnold coming back to Minnesota?
I've wrestled with this a lot, especially with this back half of the year, and maybe that affecting him negatively. If you're Minnesota, how do you not bring him back?
I know, but you got J.J. McCarthy waiting in the wings.
Right, but if I'm Minnesota, I'm thinking, J.J. McCarthy, it's a weaker quarterback class for this upcoming draft. J.J. McCarthy, nobody knows what he's got. Nobody's seen him play, and nobody see him play one snap in the NFL. Do you take a chance and maybe a team really likes him and you get as much value as you can right now? Because, I mean, when you have a season like this, you go 15-2 or 14-3, whatever. 15-2. So when you have a season like this, maybe he doesn't go for 4,300 yards again, and maybe he comes down a little bit. But that defense is still ridiculous. He's proven that he can win games. You got Justin Jefferson. You got Jordan Addison. I would be shocked if they didn't bring him back. If I'm the GM, I got to bring him back.
Yeah, I wonder if if you call your shot early and you try to go and trade for Sam Darnold with this is obviously assuming he comes back to Minnesota, but what do you think the price is for him? Like an early second, you know what I mean?
I don't know if it would be that much. Are we talking dynasty?
Oh, we're talking dynasty.
Talking dynasty. Yeah, I mean, a second round pick, I would say. Definitely not a first. I don't think that's necessary at all. Definitely a second round pick. I mean, if I'm sitting there and I'm trying to, I don't know if I can take the gamble, which then goes back on my point that I just brought up. So it makes it difficult when you're talking about the NFL side, but then the fantasy side.
Yeah.
But for a dynasty trade, if you're weak at quarterback, I mean, he's a good option.
Right. And I was going to say, what does he cost you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He doesn't cost you much, but obviously that's with the assumption that number one, Minnesota brings him back, and number two, they bring him back as the starter, because you don't know what JJ McCarthy, we could be sitting here in June and end of June, July, and it's like we got a camp battle on our hands, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's Sam Darnold versus JJ McCarthy, and they brought this coaching staff brought JJ McCarthy in to be the future.
Yeah.
So Sam Darnold would have to do something pretty special in the offseason to really, win that job. And that's with the caveat of if he even comes back,
Right.
I could also see, going off on another tangent, free agency wise, I could see like a Cleveland bringing him in, you know what I mean, with the situation they have with Deshaun Watson and not knowing what to do, and just to bridge themselves for the future, so things definitely to consider.
And then going back to trading for Darnold, when it comes to fantasy, I'll put it to you this way: if I'm a Darnold manager and somebody's actively trying to trade for him, I'm definitely trying to get as much as I can get.
Oh yeah.
So you have to, if you're on the other side trying to get Darnold, you got to make sure that you're not giving up too much. Also, if I'm somebody who's trying to go after Darnold, I'm waiting this out a little bit. I would not do this too early. You want to see what goes on with the draft. You want to see if anything changes with McCarthy, what they end up doing with Darnold's contract. I think they can still franchise tag him, so that's also an option. I'm definitely, if you're trying to get Darnold, I'd say wait as long as you can. That might also bring the price down, which would help out, because you don't want to pull the trigger too early and then you're screwed.
Of course, yeah. All right, moving on to our QB7. QB7 is Bo Nix. So back to what we were talking about before. I was someone who had Kyler Murray, and in the second half of the year, I turned to Bo Nix, and Bo Nix drafted as the QB 24, 326.2 fantasy points, 3,775 passing yards, 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 66% completion percentage, and my man did it on the ground, 430 yards and 4 touchdowns.
I was unfamiliar with this game, I'm not going to lie.
Absolutely. Week 8 was the QB 2, Week 11 was the QB 3, and Week 12 was the QB 7. Home and road splits, definitely did better at home, 19 touchdowns versus 10 on the road. And first half of the year he was QB 9. I think a lot of people, like Wu said, was unfamiliar with his game in general, right? And I don't think we expected, Bo Nix, who is, I think he's 24 years old.
He's got to be up there, because I'm pretty sure
he's an older guy, right? He was in college. Yeah, 24-year-old quarterback. Obviously Sean Payton believed in him, and it showed, right? But listen, slow start to the first half of the year. Even though he was the QB 9, but I think a lot of it you saw he did it on the ground with his legs,
yes.
Right? So you see in the first half of the year, Week 1 against Seattle, 35 rushing yards and a touchdown. Week 3 against Tampa Bay, 47 yards and a touchdown. Like, those were very important to his game.
Yeah, and it helps in terms of development. When the NFL and college, the speed is completely different. He spends all that time at Oregon and Auburn, and that's the other thing is when I'm saying, I was unfamiliar with the rushing part of his game. When you're in college for that long, I think we become so numb, to those players that are sticking around more compared to the more flashy guys. Being in the SEC, and everybody knows their names right away, but when you're sticking around in college for those extra years, we kind of forget about them. But yeah, when you're coming into the league and the game speeds up, the play calls are longer. There's a lot more you got to do pre-snap and in the huddle. When you have legs and you can use them, that can definitely help a lot, and you can extend plays, extend drives, and ultimately it led to a lot of success for Denver.
Yeah. I think future outlook for Bo Nix, I definitely think another pass catcher is warranted,
Yep.
but I also think he needs some help in the run game.
Yeah.
Take in mind, this is very early mocks, but a lot of early mocks have someone like Ashton Jeanty going to Denver, and I think someone like Jeanty going to Denver would be massive for Bo Nix's game
100%.
because that's a dynamic player you can give the ball to,
Yeah.
and you take the heat off yourself. And could you just imagine read options with Bo Nix and Ashton Jeanty?
He's got the legs for it.
It'd be insane. So, depends on the moves that are made. But, I personally think that they're going to invest in the offense. It's Sean Payton. You know what I mean? You think back into the years of Sean Payton with, the Drew Brees, the, Marquise Colston, the Michael Thomases.
Oh, yeah.
I think you're going to see the Denver Broncos invest in the offense, and I see Bo Nix as a potential buy. Now, I don't know.
Yeah.
How the Bo Nix manager feels, coming off the year. They definitely probably feel better than they expected. It might be a hard pay up, but listen, paying up and they make those moves and you get an even greater value.
100%.
It might be worth it to pull the trigger on it now.
Yeah.
As opposed to you waiting until the start of the year or even the first half of the year and my man's on fire.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that they got rid of Judy. Because you imagine him in his
they needed him.
He killed in Cleveland, and that was with some really shaky quarterback play compared to what they would have gotten with Nix. So it would have made it, especially with having Sutton, he had a good year as well. So that would have made Bo Nix's life a little bit easier. So yeah, I mean they definitely need a running back. Javonte Williams confirmed, not the guy.
Yeah,
we can say that now.
And neither is Julio McLaughlin either.
No,
what I mean?
Yeah.
So they definitely need something.
And Sean Payton offense, it's worked in the past. We've seen him do it with multiple guys, multiple weapons. So I think this is a really good spot for Nix. And yeah, if you can go out and get him, I would do it.
Why not?
And
right?
especially, you have to assume that whoever has Bo Nix, they already had an established quarterback. He's only been in the league 1 year, so that Knicks manager might be able to be flexible with trading away a quarterback, so it might make it a little bit easier.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to move into our QB6. QB6 is Mr. Jared Goff. Jared Goff, ADP was the QB 14. He gave you 330.5 fantasy points, 4,629 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, 12 picks to go along with a 72% completion percentage. Listen, I put this in our notes. Goff, you can count on Goff to give you 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns almost every single year, which is insane. Highlight performances: week 11 he was the QB1, week 15 the QB2, week 16 the QB3. Definitely better at home than he was away. First half of the season was the QB 16. Second half he was the QB 4. Like he came through and gave you some big games.
Yep, definitely better at home, playing in that dome. And when you have an offensive line like that, you can read a book back there during the game if you want. So given all that time and the amount of weapons he's got, it's like a perfect scenario. We will have to see what happens losing Ben Johnson, how much that affects it.
Yes.
You have to assume that the offense is the team as a whole is still going to be uber aggressive just because of Dan Campbell. But Ben Johnson is so creative with those plays. Like nobody runs hook and ladders in the middle of the second quarter.
Right.
Like it's just insane to see things like that. So maybe there's a little bit of drop off, but they got so many studs.
No, and one of the big things that I put in here is that he's tied to Amon-Ra St. Brown for the next 4 years. So you have that consistent, QB1 play with the wide receiver 1 play that'll propel you during the year, and I'm just looking at some of these box scores, like against Jacksonville, 412 yards and 4 touchdowns, against Buffalo, 494 yards and 5 touchdowns. And like, you don't expect it from Jared Goff.
Yeah.
Like think about it.
He was wrote off.
When they traded Matt Stafford and got Jared Goff. The plan was he was the bridge guy. Like he was the guy that get them through the next guy. And my man just played his tail off and was, got him that second contract to be like, this is our franchise quarterback. You know what I mean?
And this is all with an elite rushing game.
Yes.
It's not even like they don't got a running back there and they
No, they
have
have
to
two.
throw. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. They have the rushing game and they got the passing game. Again, Ben Johnson, we don't know how much he had to do with that. I'm assuming a lot, but I don't expect a lot of regression.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to wait and see who the OC is that's going to take the place of Ben Johnson. But whoever this OC is going to come into studs. Like, along with Goff, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown. You have Jameson Williams, who came on strong. Gibbs, who's a monster.
And Laporta didn't even have a good year.
And Laporta didn't even have a good. I was just getting to him. You saw nothing out of Laporta. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't even know. They might just be focusing on their defense when it comes to the draft. Like, their offense might be just set as it is. So you pretty much have a good idea of, going into a draft or, trade value, what you're getting.
Absolutely. All right. We are now going to get into our top 5, and no greater man to start off our top 5 than Jayden Daniels, rookie quarterback out of LSU. He was the QB5, drafted as the QB15, 359.8 fantasy points, 3,568 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 69% completion percentage, and let's almost go for 1,000 yards, 891 and 6 touchdowns, right? He was the QB1 in weeks 12 and 16, QB2 in week 13. Home and road splits, definitely better at home than he was away, but here's the crazy thing. First half of the year was the QB3.
Dude got right to it off the
right,
and
second half of the year had a little bit of a drop off, but he's the QB5. Like, so I guess, Woo, my question to you is, was this the greatest rookie quarterback performance we've ever seen?
I mean, it's got to be, and he's got a chance to keep piling onto that, which is just absolutely insane. Dan Snyder, I hope it keeps him up all night because it just goes to show, like, ownership. Like, even though they're not on the field and maybe they don't have a ton to do with decisions depending on the team, it matters. And when you get rid of bad owners and bring in new ownership, this is what you get.
Yeah, whenever I think of Jayden Daniels, I always think back to the Hard Knocks episode of I can't remember the name of the general manager of the Giants.
Oh, Schoen?
Yes, and his son is like, he's asking his son who to take, and he's like, take Jayden Daniels.
If only Brick Johnson was that smart.
I know.
What are your next?
Like, what do you have to lose,
Yeah.
And the other crazy tidbit I heard about Jayden Daniels is my man is in the lab with the VR headset.
I had never heard of that.
No, I hadn't either. So for those of you who don't know, Jayden Daniels took that Heisman year at LSU when he transferred from Arizona State. He invested in this VR headset where they played the plays at 1.75 speed, so just a little bit faster than the normal game. So because you think about it, like QB, yes, it's physical, it's athletic and things like that, but it's more mental than any other position. And if you're able to process things at 1.75 speed, faster, 100%. The game is just going to slow down for you. And I feel like that's critical for rookies. I think you're going to see, as the years go on and rookie quarterbacks come in, that's going to be a pivotal tool for them to get better quicker.
Going back, I'd never heard of this VR headset stuff. Actually, there was an interview I listened to recently. It was with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and they were talking about Jayden Daniels because of his time in Washington. And he had said that, towards the back half of his career, they were starting to do that VR headset stuff, but I guess he wasn't a fan of it. And I guess it just wasn't used a lot, but clearly it's doing something.
It's doing something, right?
And like you said, it slows everything down when you get into that huddle. Your heartbeat slows down. You can make sure you communicate effectively. And then it's also giving you those pre-snap reads, which is huge when you're at the line. So, it's been great for him.
Next year, Jayden Daniels is drafted as the QB what, Woo?
I still think Josh Allen goes ahead of him.
Yes.
And Lamar's probably going to win MVP. He's got to go ahead of him.
Right.
But
after that,
I don't think there's anybody else.
You know what I mean? Like,
good luck trying to trade for this guy.
No.
So way.
I just want to say, so Woo and I are in a dynasty league. I reached out to the Jayden Daniels manager before this podcast and just said, listen, what would it take to get Jayden Daniels? And it was just flat out, he's not for sale. You know what I mean? And I believe it because, like,
unless you throw in your 401k.
Yeah, you just got to throw the book at this guy in order to get him. But we'll see how he does next year. Can he repeat with the current weapons he has? I raved about Terry McLaurin at the beginning of this podcast.
Good for him.
I don't know if that's enough. Going a year later, now everyone's seen what you got.
Yeah, I think need somebody else.
I think we need another asset to level ourselves up.
Spot?
question mark. Who knows? That's actually an interesting one that I did not think of. That could be very good.
Like I mentioned before with Mahomes, like Jaden Daniels, if you give him the ball at the end of a game and they're down one possession, you can almost like just feel confident and just sit back and be comfortable with this drive, and he's going to go score. He did it against Philly in the regular season. He's done it numerous times. He had that insane Hail Mary against Chicago. He just seems so calm and poised, and everything it seems to be moving in slow motion. Like anytime you're playing a sport, whether it's football or basketball, and you listen to these big athletes talk about it, the quicker you can, in your career, have the game just slow down for you. Everything is just so much easier. So that's a huge advantage for him.
Absolutely. We're going to move on to our QB4, Mr. Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield drafted as a QB 21. So QB 21 to QB 4, that's a great return.
That's huge.
368.8 fantasy points, 4,500 passing yards, 41 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, 71% completion percentage. And here's something that you didn't get a lot from Baker of years of past. Man did it on the ground, right? 378 rushing yards to go along with 3 touchdowns. Home and road splits, more passing touchdowns at home than he was away. QB2 first half of the year and QB10 in the second half of the year. But what is there to say about Baker Mayfield? This is what everyone has always wanted from Baker Mayfield, right? You wanted to see this consistently. You saw from his rookie year, before Justin Herbert and Jaden Daniels, Baker Mayfield was the rookie, right? He had the greatest rookie season of any quarterback in the NFL, so this was what you had hoped for, and now he's in a great situation, or was in a great situation in Tampa Bay. TBD on things. Obviously offensive coordinator Liam Cohen has gone to Jacksonville.
Shout out Rhodey.
Shout out Rhodey. Godwin is a free agent this year.
Yep.
Mike Williams another year older. We'll see what we get from Baker Mayfield in the future.
Yeah, this was the year of former Carolina Panthers quarterbacks. Yes. Baker was pretty much out of the league at one point. He hops on a plane to LA and takes him on a game-winning drive, and all of a sudden he's back. But he was the number 1 pick. His career arc is just insane, and I'm happy for him. He's really hard to not root for.
No,
he's just one of those guys. He's always got so much fire, so much passion. He's running over dudes when he could have just ran out of bounds just to get an extra yard. Yep. He's one of those guys that I can only imagine. His presence in the locker room, he probably just fires him up so much.
I pose this question to you. Do you think this is the peak Baker peak of Baker Mayfield's career?
It would be awesome to see him be any better than this. 4,500 yards and 41 touchdowns is ridiculous. 71 completion percentage. He does turn the ball over a little bit, but it's just so exciting to watch him just air it out. Yeah. And when you got Mike Evans keeping that 1,000-yard streak, that was really cool to see. But yeah, it's difficult unless he actually dives into this rushing ability and keeps adding to that. That would be awesome. But I don't know passing the ball if he can. I don't know if he's a 5,000-yard guy.
Yeah. I think with Cohen leaving, it's definitely scary. Godwin being a free agent, and does Jalen McMillan step up into that Godwin-esque role of the wide receiver too? Because listen, Mike Evans is going to retire as a Buccaneer. You know what I mean? You're always going to have him. But, I think, in Dynasty, it could be an opportunity where you sell high while you can. Yeah.
Going back to the question you just asked, I don't know if he can get any better than this. If so, maybe a little bit, if he adds to his running game more and he actually, commits to that. But if somebody's actually interested, you sell while you can, in my opinion.
Yeah. And if there's a way you can, maybe get younger or get more consistent, maybe trading Baker Mayfield for a Jared Goff, would
that's the other thing. If you're flexible at quarterback, I would definitely consider trading him.
Yeah. I was gonna say trading Baker Mayfield for Jared Goff and picks. He might be better off than holding on to the bag that is known as Baker Mayfield.
Oh yeah.
Right. Going into QB3, we're in our top 3 now, right? Joe Burrow, QB3. Taken as a QB7, 370.8 fantasy points, 4,918 passing yards, 43 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 71% completion percentage. Home and road splits were essentially identical. And first half it was a QB5, second half was a QB2. I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Will, because I know Joe Burrow is your guy.
Yeah, just He's one of those guys really tough to not root for. Like even going back to LSU, just watching him play, it was awesome. I will say I called my shot in this very basement.
Yes, you did.
That I took Joe Burrow in our redraft league. I believe it was like 7th or 8th round. So a little bit behind what his ADP was. So I was happy that he fell to me. Like I mentioned earlier, my team was just a complete dumpster fire with injuries. So I did have to let him go, which sucked. And then in our dynasty league, he was destroyed me in that championship game.
Yeah.
It was over before it even started with him. But yeah, I mean, what also sucks is you just wasted a year of great Joe Burrow.
Yes,
like
you did.
He went nuclear, and they still found a way to miss the playoffs.
Yep,
and that's got to be super frustrating for him. It's got to be frustrating for his teammates. I know Chase isn't happy. And then, just as a front office, you found the guy, you hit on him, and you just wasted a year of, one of his better seasons. He was damn near 5,000 yards.
Yeah, one of the things I put in my notes is, can we get this guy some offensive line help, please?
Oh
right, and I think when you think back to Joe Burrow, you're always going to tie back to that pivotal moment of I can't remember the year, but the year they drafted Chase, and it was Penei Sewell or Chase, Sewell or Chase, and they obviously went Chase, and they explode together. But it's like you wonder what the offensive line, adding someone like that could have done to Joe Burrow. One thing I will say, especially when playing fantasy football, because you want to be strategic about those things. Obviously rushing quarterbacks are key. I will sit here and say that if you want to have a shot at, going nuclear in your league and having a monster year, you got to do it on the back of a rushing quarterback. But listen, you can have a passing quarterback like Joe Burrow who does something nuts like this, almost 5,000 yards and 43 touchdowns, but it's so out of the realm of what normal passing quarterbacks give you or give you, so you have to have someone like that in order to give yourself a fighting chance. Whereas when you have rushing quarterbacks in your leagues, it's a lot more consistent because you get the rushing aspect along with the passing aspect. So when we talk about the future of Joe Burrow, it's going to be what happens with T. Higgins. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's going to be big.
I know Joe Burrow has said, at press conferences after games that, he wants T back, but it's like, are they going to be able to afford Chase and Higgins? Because Chase hasn't signed a contract yet, and whatever he gets as a contract is going to be greater signed than what Justin Jefferson got. 100%. So you have to take that into consideration on top of what they're paying Burrow. I don't know if they have enough money to pay for Chase.
Yeah,
Higgins. Sorry.
Yeah, and when we mention his not lack of rushing ability, but he would prefer to stand back there and throw that ball deep to Chase or whoever's out there. But he reminds me of Herbert. Same idea. They would prefer to sit back there and throw, but they can run if they want to.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. One thing I will say about Burrow going into next year's draft, I think I'm going to be out on Joe Burrow.
It's going to be way too high.
It's going to be way too high, right? I can see him probably being QB5, QB6 right after right after Hurts, or someone else, above him, and I think that's going to be too pricey for a pocket passing quarterback.
Yeah, this past year was the year to take him.
Yeah. Yeah,
and even Dynasty, his price is going to be insane, which it always was to begin with. But this year just proves it that he's one of those franchise guys that you want to keep on your team.
Definitely. All right, we're moving into our QB2. QB2, Josh Allen. Josh Allen, ADP is a QB1. Not much difference. 380 fantasy points, 3,731 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, 6 interceptions with a 64% completion percentage, and we're going to add 531 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns. Josh was definitely better passing-wise on the road, touchdowns-wise at home, but first half of the year was a QB4, a little less than what you expected, but still dominant.
Yep.
And second half of the year was the QB1.
Yeah, even with that being in the QB4 in the first half, he had 2 finishes outside the top 20. Another one that he finished quarterback 14. So, I have him on my dynasty team. I came into this year, thinking I was in a position to win a championship, and I was. Especially on the coattails of Josh Allen. But those first 4 weeks, I was like, ooh, do I got to make a move on this guy? I was actively, shopping him around and seeing what I could get. And when he had that 50-point game against LA, kind of had to, I knew what I was getting, and I was confident going into the playoffs. So He's just insane. He's insane.
Is definitely shaky in the first half of the year. I think it was trying to get comfortable with that Joe Brady offense. And getting some pieces involved. You had Keon Coleman as a rookie. You didn't know what you got out of Khalil Shakir.
Yep.
And then the second half of the year, you really started to see those pieces started to click. I really wish they got a rhythm with Amari Cooper. You know what I mean? And obviously James Cook was a baller this year.
Yep.
I think very sneaky was a baller.
Yeah, he kind of flew under the radar.
Absolutely. He's definitely a MVP candidate going forward.
Yep.
But is he worth the cost in both redraft and in dynasty?
So I'm gonna answer your question with a question to you, because you've won a championship in a redraft with Josh Allen. I had mentioned earlier, I'm not huge on taking quarterbacks that early. I try to see if it is one of these top guys that does go kind of early. I like to see if they fall a round or two and then make that decision. But I've never been in a spot where I'm taking a Josh Allen or Hurts or Lamar that early. So you were able to win a championship with him. How did that, when you take, it was like the end of the second round, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, I think it was either end of the second or beginning of the third.
So how does that affect how you're drafting the rest of the way?
Listen, when you get a guy like Josh Allen, you have a difference maker at quarterback week in and week out. And for my, obviously for the opponent to look across the way and see, like, you got Josh Allen who can on some weeks against LA go for 50 points. Like it's a huge difference maker. It's almost like when you had like the elite Travis Kelce in your tight end spot, and it just, kind of made you feel like you could go take chances in other areas. Like when you're in your draft and you can get someone like Josh Allen who's a difference maker, I can take a shot on a wide receiver, or I can take a shot on a running back who may be injury prone, because you have elite level production coming out of Josh Allen. Clearly the man's not going anywhere anytime soon. I think we were saying that he probably slots in the QB1, QB2 next year, right? But it's, how do we build next year, right? Does Keon Coleman become a little bit more prevalent in the offense?
Has to.
You know what I mean? Do they add another weapon? Do we finally see Dalton Kincaid kind of live up to the hype of what he was supposed to be? So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, like I early in the year I was debating, like, do I need to get rid of Josh Allen and try and recoup some draft capital and try and make a move elsewhere. So I think going into this offseason, I did get to the championship. I ended up losing, whatever. But, still having Josh Allen on my team, I think he's a guy that I kind of have to make untouchable, because he can win me a week when I'm not supposed to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm not sure, a return. And I would assume the return would have to be huge.
Huge.
Like I would
it's gotta be like 3 firsts.
It's got to be minimum. And I would like a quarterback as well on top of that. Well, I'll put this out to the league. It's a bag. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Obviously you can get lucky on rookie picks, so that could change the conversation completely. But there just aren't a lot of guys who can just win you a week when you're not supposed to win, and Josh Allen is one of those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to round out our fantasy finishes for quarterback with our QB1, Mr. Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson was taken as the QB3, 424.4 fantasy points, 4,172 passing yards, 41 passing touchdowns for Lamar Jackson, 4 interceptions, 67% completion percentage, and classic Lamar Jackson, 915 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns, right?
Absurd.
The man is insane. First half of the year was a QB1. Second half of the year was a QB3. You really saw in the second year of a Todd Monken offense, Lamar really kind of just step into his own, and just became untouchable. And listen, when you add someone like Derrick Henry to hand the ball off, that's pretty great.
It's
right?
a nice luxury.
So over 4,000 passing yards and over 900 rushing yards. Like, it's insane. It's insane.
He had 1 week where he wasn't a top 12 quarterback.
Yeah.
1 week.
1 week. That's insane. And you look at some of those, performances that he had. You go to the one against, Cincinnati, where he's 290 yards passing, 4 touchdowns.
The passing is huge.
Yeah, and
because you knew what you were getting with the running game, and like Russian quarterbacks are huge in fantasy.
Yep.
So even though his passing might not have been at the level that other quarterbacks were at, you knew he had his legs. But now he's at the level that these guys are throwing the ball on top of 900 rushing yards.
Right. Right. He's an elite level guy. I don't know what really to say about him. He took care of the ball. Had four interceptions, I think it was, right.
Yep.
Which is phenomenal. I think this was definitely the best fantasy season of his career.
And this was without like dominant pass catchers.
Yes.
Like this was a huge step back from Mark Andrews. He figured it out second half, but that he was non-existent in the first half of the year.
They were sending out SOS calls for
exactly. And like Zay Flowers didn't have a bad year whatsoever. But I mean, he was a first round pick. You expect him to take a bigger step. I don't think he really did. But this is without, a dominant wide receiver one that some of these quarterbacks have, and he was still able to figure it out.
Yeah. I guess my question is, can he do it again, next year?
This could be his third MVP. I think he should win MVP. I think I am leaning towards Lamar in that conversation, but I see no reason as to why he's going to take a step back anytime soon. I mean, we should have known back when he was at Louisville, like that Heisman season was insane.
Yeah.
And like even Donovan Mitchell came out and said it, like he had the basketball team up at 6 a.m. to go watch him. Like that doesn't happen often.
No.
So we should have been ready for this. If someone were to take Lamar over Josh Allen in the next draft, I don't think I would be upset at that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you also got to think another year with Derrick Henry. Hopefully Derrick Henry can continue to produce. Obviously this year for Derrick Henry was insane,
yep.
But hopefully he brings that all together. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps it up. That is episode 1 of
fun.
The Fourth and Fantasy podcast. Yeah, I had a great time. Listen, you can follow us on our socials, Twitter at Fourth and Fantasy Pod, Instagram at Fourth and Fantasy. We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube. You're going to be seeing a lot of us, ladies and gentlemen, going forward. I'm excited, Will.
Yeah, this was a great first start. And I'm excited for what we got.
Absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you take care. We will see you on the other side.
See ya.